now. Clark comes up with a steal. Clark thought about pulling up from three, will dip inside and lay it in.
In a shocking turn of events, what was supposed to be a special week for Caitlin Clark in her hometown of Indianapolis turned into a big problem for the WNBA. The city had put up an advert to celebrate her, but instead, many seats were empty and fans were angry, boycotting the All-Star Game in protest. So, how did the league let things go so wrong? And how did Caitlin Clark's injury and absence change everything? Join us as we dive into the unexpected boycott of the WNBA All-Star Game. WNBA boycott. Indianapolis had spent months getting ready for what was supposed to be a historic weekend in the WNBA. The entire city had been buzzing with excitement. At the airport, travelers were greeted by a life-sized replica of the All-Star basketball court, a bold welcome that showed just how seriously the city was taking the event. Local shops stocked their shelves to the brim, restaurants brought on extra workers, and everyone was expecting record-breaking crowds to flood the streets and fill every seat. When tickets first went on sale, they disappeared within hours. Prices shot up quickly. The cheapest ones started at $121, while resale prices averaged $262. Courtside seats were being sold for thousands. According to TickPick, this was the most expensive WNBA All-Star Game in history. And at the center of it all was one name: Caitlin Clark. She was the star attraction. Everyone had been counting down to see her light up the court in her home state, right in front of family, friends, and thousands of loyal fans packed inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Her presence alone was expected to turn the entire arena into a roaring sea of excitement. This was meant to be her moment, her celebration. But everything turned upside down. That was the day fans learned, through social media and sports outlets, that Caitlin Clark had suffered a groin injury and would not be playing. The reaction was immediate and brutal. The buzz that had taken months to build collapsed in minutes. Ticket prices fell off a cliff. That average resale price of $262 dropped to just $64 in a few short hours. That's a massive 75% plunge. Ticket sellers were in panic mode. Many had bought tickets expecting to flip them for a profit, but now they were desperately slashing prices, hoping to recover even a fraction of their money. From $121 to $100, then $80, then $70, then $64. But still, buyers were nowhere to be found. The energy that had once lit up the city had completely disappeared. The message coming from fans was loud, simple, and devastating. No Caitlin, no game. People weren't just disappointed, they were out. Some had flown in or booked expensive hotel rooms just to see her play. But when the news broke, many canceled their plans, packed their bags, and left. Without Clark, they didn't care. The event didn't matter anymore. This wasn't a small drop in interest. It was a full-blown collapse. A live, public unraveling of what had once been a dream weekend. And the WNBA could no longer ignore it. The league was being shown, in the most undeniable way, just how much Caitlin Clark meant to its popularity. And this wasn't even the first time. Back in May, when she missed a few regular season games due to a quad injury, ticket prices had already taken a major hit. For example, prices for the Washington game dropped by 47%, and tickets for the much-anticipated Chicago game fell by 71%. But those were just regular season games. The problems didn't stop at the arena doors. The entire local economy took a punch. For nearly 2 years, every Indiana Fever home game had sold out. But now, during what was supposed to be the most exciting basketball weekend the city had hosted since the NBA All-Star Game, the stands were suddenly filled with empty seats. Businesses that had poured thousands into All-Star-themed merchandise were now staring at shelves full of unsold goods. Hotels that had once been fully booked were now getting cancellations. Restaurants that had stocked up for big crowds were left with empty tables and too much staff. All over downtown Indianapolis, the mood shifted from celebration to disappointment. Clark had been the main draw, and without her, the whole energy and the flow of money simply disappeared. Inside the arena, fewer fans meant fewer customers at merchandise stalls. Nearby bars and eateries that had expected a flood of customers were suddenly quiet. This was no longer just about basketball, it was a wake-up call for the league. Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rising star, she was the engine driving record attendance, massive viewership, and a new wave of fans. When other big-name players miss games, ticket prices don't collapse like this. But Clark's absence turned the entire event upside down. The market had spoken clearly. Without her, this All-Star Game lost its shine. It exposed a hard truth the league had avoided facing, that this groundbreaking season, with all its sold-out games and glowing headlines, was mostly riding on one person's shoulders. Without her, all the excitement suddenly looked fragile. What made it even sadder was the fact that this was only the second time in WNBA history that the All-Star Game had truly revolved around a breakout superstar. In the past, these events had often felt more like formalities, featuring talented players, yes, but lacking the electric pull of a name that everyone recognized. And this injury didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of months of intense, sometimes brutal games. Clark had taken hit after hit from opponents, pushed, grabbed, and knocked down repeatedly, often without any calls from the referees. The physical toll added up. Her body had been through too much, and by the time All-Star Weekend rolled around, it simply couldn't hold up anymore. So how did we end up with an All-Star Game in Indiana, Clark's home state, without Caitlin Clark on the court? Was she treated fairly? Let's find out. Clark's struggles and double standards. It all began last season, when Caitlin Clark was just starting out in her rookie year. Almost overnight, she became a lightning rod for rough, overly aggressive play. Incredibly, she ended up being on the receiving end of 20% of all the flagrant fouls in the entire WNBA that year. And much of that came from Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky. These weren't just hard basketball fouls, these were deliberate, punishing hits that went beyond the game. What made it even more disturbing was the attitude behind it. Players weren't just fouling Clark, they were laughing in her face afterward, making light of what was basically physical assault on the court. In any other job, this kind of repeated abuse would land someone in jail. But in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark was expected to just take it and move on. Her coach, Stephanie White, wasn't blind to what was happening. She saw the warning signs early on. From the moment Clark joined the Indiana Fever, White noticed how refs allowed a level of brutality against her that no other player had to deal with. She spoke up again and again throughout the season, pointing out the clear double standard in how officials treated her star guard, and she wasn't exaggerating. Game after game, Clark was being battered on the court while the officials stood by, doing absolutely nothing. Coach White had experienced this even before she began coaching Clark. She saw it happen when she was coaching against her. Now, as Clark's coach, she was watching her take hit after hit while the refs ignored it all. White admitted she didn't know why Clark was being treated this way, but it was obvious the league wasn't interested in stopping it. Instead, she and the Fever coaching staff had to work on helping Clark adjust, trying to turn the physical play into an advantage, because they knew no help was coming from the officials. This wasn't just a problem for Clark. It reflected a much bigger issue across the league. The physicality in the WNBA had escalated to a point that even the Washington Post called it out. They criticized the terrible officiating that had turned too many games into ugly brawls. In fact, they sarcastically suggested the league change its logo to a bruise and adopt a new slogan, "No Call." That wasn't a joke. That was a reflection of what fans were seeing night after night. There's endless video evidence, defenders grabbing Clark's arms, shoving her off screens, slamming into her on drives, all with no whistles, no fouls, nothing. The referees just stood by, letting it happen. And when players saw that Clark could be targeted without consequences, it became a strategy. Teams started treating her like a tackling dummy, knowing they wouldn't get punished for it. And last year was just Caitlin Clark taking those hits, But this season, Sophie Cunningham has joined the Indiana Fever, and she's now the second most targeted player in terms of flagrant fouls. Only Clark and Aaliyah Boston have taken more. Sophie has been getting battered too, and it's opened even more eyes to the league's inconsistent, almost careless approach to fouls. The same referees who ignore brutal contact against Indiana Fever players are quick to call soft fouls when it's the Fever defending. A little touch here, a minor bump there, they blow the whistle right away. But did her injury and absence affect the game? Let's find out. WNBA injury impact. Across sports history, star players, the big names, the faces of their leagues, have typically been protected. Officials gave them room to shine and called fouls to keep the cheap shots in check. But Caitlin Clark is one of the biggest names the WNBA has ever seen, yet she's being treated like she doesn't matter. She's being crushed, and the referees are acting like their whistles are broken. The stats back it up. In the last 2.5 seasons, there have been 57 head and neck injuries in the WNBA. That's not just random chance. That's the result of a league allowing dangerous, reckless play to go unchecked, especially for smaller players like guards and forwards who are taking the brunt of these hits. Even Lisa Leslie, one of the legends of the game, understands what Clark is going through. She's seen this kind of treatment before, and she knows how serious it can get, especially with injuries like the groin strain Clark is now dealing with. The hits aren't just bruising her body, they're changing the game, creating an environment where talent is punished, not protected. Back in 2006, a WNBA legend suffered a groin injury of her own. She knows exactly how painful and frustrating it can be. She warned that this kind of injury isn't something that heals quickly. It can drag on for months, even years. That's the painful reality Caitlin Clark now faces. Not because of bad luck, and not because that's just part of the game, but because the referees simply didn't do their job. This wasn't a freak accident. It was the result of months of rough play that the league ignored. Caitlin wasn't just playing basketball. She was being grabbed, shoved, and knocked around, and most of the time, no one blew the whistle. Every time a foul went uncalled, it added more risk to her health. And eventually, that risk turned into a serious injury. The WNBA failed to protect the player who brings in the most fans, the most excitement, and the most money. And now, they're paying the price, not just in reputation but in real dollars. Ticket sales have dropped, fans are boycotting games, and the league has lost millions. That WNBA legend talked openly about what she went through. She said she had to wrap her upper thigh and glute with tight tape just to keep things in place. The groin isn't like other parts of the body where you can point and say, "It hurts right here." The pain is deep and hard to describe. It requires intense treatment, ice, heat, and most importantly, rest. But Caitlin Clark doesn't have that luxury. She's in the middle of a season, trying to carry a team and a league while dealing with an injury that could flare up at any moment. You can take all the medicine in the world, feel fine, go back to the court, and with just one sharp turn or sudden move, the pain comes roaring back. That's what makes this injury so difficult. It never fully goes away. You just learn how to live with it. That same WNBA legend admitted she still feels it today when she plays tennis. All these years later, it still lingers. So, how did the WNBA commissioner treat the crisis? Let's find out. Silence in the storm. While fans were organizing boycotts and the All-Star ticket sales were falling apart, everyone was waiting to see how WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert would handle the biggest crisis of her leadership. This was her chance to take a stand, to protect her league's biggest star, and to fix a broken system of officiating that had failed time and time again. But instead of bold action, fans got a polished corporate statement that felt completely out of touch. It didn't address the real issue. It didn't hold anyone accountable. Players and coaches had been speaking up all week about the poor officiating, some even risking fines to do so. The complaints weren't just noise, they were desperate calls for help. When Engelbert finally responded during All-Star Weekend, She gave the kind of answer people have come to expect from executives. She called her meeting with more than 40 players and league officials productive and constructive. She talked about shared goals and teamwork. But she never once admitted that officiating was a serious problem or that it had anything to do with Clark's injury. That's not what fans wanted to hear. They didn't want buzzwords and boardroom talk. They wanted real accountability. They wanted the referees who let Clark get pushed around all season to face consequences. But instead, Engelbert gave the same tired line, saying no one is ever fully happy with officiating and that all sports struggle with it. She insisted the league was working hard to put the best product on the court. But while she was dodging responsibility, the damage was already happening. Right there in Indianapolis, the All-Star celebration had turned into a disappointment. Empty seats, angry fans, and a wounded star. That's the reality the WNBA is dealing with now. Not because of bad luck, but because they refused to protect the player who mattered most. While ticket prices were crashing and local businesses were bleeding money, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert was still talking about team profitability and productive conversations. It was surreal. Fans were furious, boycotting with their wallets, and yet she acted like nothing was wrong. What fans actually want is honesty. A real apology for the terrible officiating. A promise to protect players like Caitlin Clark. But can the WNBA actually change its leadership style? Let's take a closer look. WNBA leadership failures. Instead of owning up to the truth, Engelbert gave fans a pile of corporate buzzwords, vague talk about unity and shared goals. It felt cold, robotic, and completely out of step with reality. Meanwhile, the city of Indianapolis was counting its losses, and fans were organizing boycotts. But all Engelbert could do was defend the status quo. That silence made everything worse. The problem wasn't just Clark, it was the pattern. Against Breanna Stewart, she shoots 14 free throws. Asia Wilson, 13. But when Aaliyah Boston suits up, she can't even stay on the floor for 20 minutes without racking up fouls. It's like the refs are going out of their way to sabotage Indiana, and if you wear a Fever jersey this season, it feels like you're automatically playing against both the other team and the officials. Clark, the league's biggest draw, got injured because refs wouldn't call obvious fouls, and the league's response was corporate fluff. That's when fans lost all trust. They stopped showing up. They stopped spending money. The WNBA got what it earned, an all-star game that many fans now call an embarrassment to basketball. Without Clark, the league was trying to sell a show no one wanted to watch, and it showed. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was full of empty seats. The energy was dead. The game was awful. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of the season. Instead, it felt like a sleepy practice scrimmage. Fans had finally had enough. No more excuses. No more being talked down to by a league that keeps attacking its own supporters. In other sports, you don't hear leagues constantly blaming their fans, but somehow, in the WNBA, that's become normal. And to make matters worse, the league turned the game into a joke. The four-point shot gimmick made it even more painful to watch. No defense, no real competition, just players launching half-court shots in what looked like a glorified layup drill. It was embarrassing. Even die-hard fans were tuning out. You know what moment got more attention than the actual game? The New York Liberty sending their mascot to recruit Caitlin Clark during All-Star Weekend. Think about that. A mascot became the biggest story. Not the basketball, not the players on the court, the mascot. That stunt by the Liberty said it all. They understood what the league didn't. How to treat a superstar like she actually matters. That mascot's playful recruitment attempt overshadowed everything else that weekend. The All-Star Weekend wasn't about celebrating the game. It was about drama and distraction. And it left Indiana fans like Aaliyah Boston visibly frustrated. This was her home turf, and yet she watched another team try to steal the spotlight. This wasn't just about one player. The Clark effect is bigger than stats or jersey sales. It's about the future of women's basketball. She brought attention, energy, and excitement the league had never seen before. But this all-star disaster proved the league isn't ready to keep that momentum alive without her. Fans delivered a message loud and clear. We expect better. The empty seats, the slashed ticket prices, the backlash. It wasn't just about Clark sitting out. It was about fans feeling ignored, betrayed, lied to. The league kept bragging about record ratings and booming growth, but this weekend told a different story. Take Clark out of the picture and suddenly the product feels hollow. The worst part is that the WNBA had everything handed to them. Clark's star power, a national spotlight, and fans ready to invest in the sport. And instead of rising to the occasion, they fumbled it. Poor officiating, tone-deaf leadership, and a total disconnect from what fans actually want. So, what do you think about the surprising WNBA All-Star Game boycott? Let us know your answer in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.